Yeah, actually, can we turn off the stream? You were saying that, right?
Lucy was saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Have this screen upside down. Speech. Just watching themselves. Are you ready, Pan?
No.
You might need another minute. This wretched thing has murdered your family, left you destitute and physically broken. It deserves nothing, you owe it nothing, it has left you with nothing. In closing opposition, we would rather live what life we have left on our feet than beg on our knees to this coward of a being who could have tested you or helped you in any way. It could have let you know that this was a test. And it tested you in this way, it would have tested anybody else, and it didn't. This is cruel. This is twisted. This is not deserving of your faith. Religion, faith, belief is a contract that he has burnt before your eyes and laughed as you wept. Opening government tell us that when this happens, you look to answers as to why me. When the answer on prop is that God tested you, then your path to heaven is paved with the murder of your children. Even if you see them again, their lives were shorter, their experiences were lessened, their lives were seen as disposable at the altar of this supposed God and your path to whatever afterlife it thinks is just. A transactional cost is what we get out of closing government. We think that this cost is illegitimate when it is only inflicted on you, when it undercuts, and we think that this undercuts the framing at the start of the member of government speech, because we do not fundamentally believe that this God is worthy of your faith. We think that it is a contract that needs to be abided by. We cannot conceive of a way of how anybody who has gone through this would keep the faith, not would choose to keep the faith, but how after all of this, you could keep any faith at all in this thing. Opening government say that you would go to hell instead, and that is bad. As Lucy points out, the issue is that the info side is that you do not know the outcome. This is at best speculative. If we are doing this in the religious times as well, that opening government want to set and then get out of at a later point, the Bible hasn't been written to say that there's an hell that you're then going to. But we also believe it is unclear how this could be worse than the living, torturous hell that this thing is putting you through. Because it is also unclear that heaven is an alternative or a likely eventuality. You may have believed in this God. You may have thought that this God is all-powerful and all-existing and all-seeing. But the problem is that if you previously thought that this God was good, there is an extent to which you have seen that contract torn up in front of you and might not now think that it is good, and might not think that you will go to heaven. Everything that comes out of the government benches is incredibly speculative, not yet as a result of that. We think that you are likely devastated and unlikely to be able to have such a positive outlook that the proposition bench wants. We think that currently you have to believe positive actions, then have positive outcomes. You have been positive your entire life towards God, but you have not received the positive outcomes at the end. In the end, all that happened was that everybody that you loved, everything that you had worked for, your physical health, was stripped away from you without you having any control at any point. Faith is the ability to be rewarded for doing good in this life and the belief that you will be that will be done back to you. Note, on our side, you can still do the good things in life otherwise the proposition might want you to do and have benefit from your life. The motivation of it is somewhat different because no thank you. Now you know that the motivation for doing good things is your own agency of understanding and experiencing the world around you, as opposed to doing something for this being that has torn everything from you in the promise that it might, against all evidence that you have ever had given to you, against the most impactful evidence that you could possibly have had given to you, believe that it will still do a good thing. Being pious is not blind faith. panel. We think at best, we think that God is not the level of pure and benevolence that opposition might think. Opening government need this to ensure that you then opt into the religious framework that they set out. This responds much more directly to opening government than the mechanism of self-blame brought by opening opposition and meaningfully extends also through likelihood. You have a point.
So on your side, after you choose to leave the faith, you can no longer recognize the evil that happened as being attributable to a God, but must instead face the thing that is random and cruel, which is the arbitrariness of the universe.
That's not faith. That is the response that we have to that. You can still say that it was because of a God. You just don't have faith. And what faith in that God means is that you will have the right things done to you off of the back of that. Even if we have to bite the bullet and say, no, you think that this is just a completely random act that has happened to you. We think that that is preferable than this being the consequence of having previously believed in this God for your entire life and being able to tie the previous belief that you have had and you're buying to this being to it then choosing to put you through this supposed test that has led to everything being stripped from you. We think that that is significantly better than on the proposition bench. Accountability for actions. When out of your control, you move everything. As people, we feel a level to keep control of our actions, particularly or even super pious people, because if we can't have a level of control of our actions, then we also can't show our own acts of faith. We think that this level of control gives our life meaning, but we think that particularly after you have lost everything, when you are so destitute, when you are the poor, when you're in poor physical condition, societally these people are often stripped of their agency. You are at most need to show that you have control over your life. You have control over the actions that you have, that you have the free will to attain things. In comparison to closing government standing up and say, but you have to deal with people that lose faith. I think that this is not unreplaced. Instead, what you have is a level of meaning that is associated with your actions, the things that you positively choose to do within your life. And you're able to form your conceptualization of your meaning as an individual around the things that you have actively chosen to do, as opposed to your life just being swept along and you having absolutely no control over it. Opening government say, but you buy into the afterlife being important. But I'm not sure you do now that this has happened, because because these things shape your belief so fundamentally. This person with the life that they have lived is no longer the average religious person or the average pious person that Proposition 1. Those people didn't have to go through this test. You were the average pious person, and then all of these things happen to you, and your belief system is at least likely to be somewhat shaken. We think that faith is earned and it is not given freely. We think that Job, as the pious person, also thinks this, because piety is the belief of God as an all-knowing person. This is an active choice that this God put upon you. There are other ways that God could have your faith. Faith is not the faith is that God will see you through, and clearly in this instance, He hasn't. You had a level of trust with this being. This being broke this trust. This is not a level of trust that can ever be repaired. These were the worst things that were stripped from you. You had no control over it. We think that you should take life back into your own hands. Take back control.
Thanks, Speaker, for that fine speech. Now I'm at the government whip to conclude the government case. Here, here.
I can say that loudly because I think not one person in the room knows what the fuck what it is. Yeah. Really hard to do.
The reality with opposition is that they like to portray as if they have a comparative, as if they have another way of coping with this huge amount of laws that they have completed. But in reality, they really don't, right? They're jumping around comparatives. First of like changing faith, they've never told us what religion is this, that God doesn't have the hierarchy that would be likely perceived as punishment, as they say, or which is this faith that would be so compatible to this individual's identity. So we cannot credit at all the idea that this huge amount of laws would be called with the existence of a magic faith that they decided to invent within this round, or they just have nothing, right? And to the point that you have nothing, this is where a lot of their case goes very, very bad, right? Because it means that even if we take them at the best case scenario, right? Even if we assume that everything opposition has been saying is true, that like I perceive it as punishment, that I as an individual say that God currently is punishing me. The very important the very important thing here is that the comparative is literally not being able to give an explanation, right? It is the fact that I have lost my property, all my family, that I'm like living in a world in which all of the things that matter to me do not exist. And you have an opposition that up until this point has not told you how they're doing it, right? Except the alternatives of like changing, which again, don't really work. So now just because closing was like rebutting very quickly closing's case, we think that like basically their main point is because you thought God was really good, you had invested a lot in that relationship, and now suddenly, because all of this has happened, it doesn't work anymore. Notice that this shows how they don't engage at all with Umar's nuance, right? Umar specifically tells you why a lot of the times religions from the get-go tell you that God can be a lot of the times punishing, right? It means that to the point that I enter this religion, I am aware of the fact that this is how it looks. This is literally why religions like Christianity, their stories of teaching that religion is I placed, like Jesus Christ was crucified. This means that the struggle and the whole idea of how suddenly, oh my God, religion is not what I thought it would be. It's not true, really. Religion, and once you enter into it, has a specific relationship that explains to you how struggle a lot of the times is closely related with God, and it gives you pathways to the struggle. Therefore, they're entirely about how suddenly you can no longer invest in that religion, and this religion no longer deserves your faith, which really, that's not a principle debate. It's just what is better for this person. It's not true, right? It's just factually untrue. This is not how religious operates. This is also important because one of Umar's main claims in this debate, and an important element of his extension, which specifically portrays why religion is important in the context of suffering, is never rebutted by the opposition. We think it still remains in the debate. We think it's debate winning to the point that the main class in this debate is what happens with religion at the points of suffering. And we specifically explain why religion is designed for suffering. The way in which religion is even written is by incorporating suffering within the stories of within religious stories, right? But now also moving on to opening opposition, we have three main claims, right? The first idea is that the human would only conclude that God is malicious and wants to see you suffer, and this is why and this is something that will cause you great pain. Two responses here. Firstly, they concede to some extent that it's very difficult for humans to live a religion that they had been greatly, they were greatly invested. I'm also just gonna say that humans are pain averse and they just are very afraid to regret. This means that if I had a specific, specific element of my identity for years, it's very hard for me to say, oh, for 50 years of my life, for 40 years of my life, I was a stupid person for believing in that religion. Therefore, we think that the likely interpretation of the average person is to continue finding reasonable ways on justifying what happened to it, right? This means that you could say that religion is testing you in a specific way for improvement. This is to say, to justify with different pathways to afterlife, and this is where it becomes important. Yes.
So we give structural reasons why we view God as punishing bad people. His only conclusion is either fundamentally bad person. The choice then is believing in your eternal damnation and the way you respond.
I'm going to respond to that. Yeah, I'm going to respond to that. That's basically your second claim. It's not something new. So the second thing is this religion, but then Umar also specifically explains what, and this is why we're different from opening, right? That religion in that, it has a great variety of providing these pathways exactly because of the way it's designed. Now, their second claim, which was also theorized, basically they say that the individual is likely to perceive that as punishment, and this is extra suffering. Again, three responses here. Firstly, even if we take them at their best, at least at the very minimum, they have an explanation, right? They have an explanation, and a lot of the times it's a good one, right? I know it sounds really bad to say, ooh, someone is punishing me, but you know what? I'd rather have someone rather have to attribute that the bad things that are happening in your life are not because of you, but because of God. I think sometimes this works amazingly for people. Just saying. Secondly, again, no single alternative. Notice their alternative about switching religions is so problematic for the opening because their entire claims about why religion is problematic is opening tells you we cannot say which specific religion it is, right? So all the mechanisms that they provide on why religion is problematic when it comes to suffering are pinpointed to religion as a whole. And when we pressure them, please give us an alternative, because the people have already died, the money is already lost, this person exists with this scope of suffering. Oh, we're gonna switch religions. Which religions? We don't know. They don't want to tell us, right? Literally, they have the wrong idea by saying that this is not religious-specific debate. This is a general debate about religion. We just clearly don't understand. But then thirdly, there's also been this discussion about whether hell or whether hell or the idea of afterlife is something that is certain. Closing also tries to go on this technicality, like, oh, he's not certain of the existence. But our analysis was never contingent on that.
Yeah.
Our analysis was contingent on the impact that you have on your mental health when you believe that this is going to be the end goal. We're not going to prove to you that like hell exists. We're not going to prove to you that the idea of afterlife is there. This is something we can simply not do. What we're telling you is that the idea that the afterlife might be there, the idea that I'm going to see my kids is far better than the alternative, which opposition doesn't have. For all of these reasons, CG.
Thanks, Mia, for that speech. And now to conclude this partial semifinal, invite the opposition whip. Here.
Almost certain.
Yeah.
Probably the most certain thing in this whole debate.
Yeah, go on.
Branding. For anybody listening on the street, man, indeed, I'm in the room. Some of this is my opinion, some of this is not my opinion, and thus in totality, it is not my opinion that's religion. It's never really encapsulatable in 7 minutes. And BP kind of fucks with the concept of religion and beliefs, because you have to have a side, and I'm probably somewhere in the middle. Okay. Okay. Yeah. When you hold your baby in your hands for the first time, you look into their eyes, you believe you will see them grow up, to get married, have their own children, to live their life, to have their dreams met, to be happy, that you get to be there for that. It is not enough for proposition to say you believe you might get to see your kids again, and therefore you will do this. Because when they were born, you believed you would get to see them live a life. You believed that the God that you loved and had faith in would look after them. Whether he murdered them or he just sat back and let them die, he failed you, and you don't have that trust you once had in him, that afterlife, which I contest is probably historically not there, and I'll go through that in a second, is going to happen. It is not a technicality, prop whip, that we mentioned the motion in there. It is a weighing of probability. If I am unsure that heaven or hell is real, as an actor, as Job, I have to take into account previous versions of my beliefs, and then what happened? I believed I would see my kid grow old. It didn't happen. I believed I would probably not be really ill later on in life. That didn't happen. I believed for some weird reason all of my wealth would be removed. Like, that's a law. Like, it's much like you lost your job, all your wealth's gone. You became homeless at the end of it. Like, you cannot say that as an actor they go, oh, but they like heaven and they'll see them at the pearly gates and it'll be great. And Josh gave you a really nice Christian version. I have fucking Irish Christian upbringing. Fucking horrible. There's no footprints in the stand by me. I was going to be in hell for liking women. I was going to have a horrible life. If it is modern day religion, he might not have been the happiest person. He might have been pious out of fucking fear. Okay, sorry for cursing. Religion's complicated. Okay. let's go through it. Yeah, it's probably some form of Abrahamic faith, given, you know, the debate that's happened, and also the Book of Job. The Book of Job was written in 300 BCE, 600 years before Jesus, 800 years before the concept of sin or hell was ever fucking mentioned by Matthew. Yes, look it up. I also went to Catholic school. Schooling. So that's like saying, so it's just not clear that that is true. Even if it's modern and all Abrahamic history is intertwined, and this is analysis, not just pointing out the Bible. Dylan said themselves, religious people are able to believe and apply different rules to themselves. Modern Christians don't think that mixed fabrics is a sin anymore, right? There's lots of things that people are able to change. Meaning, unlike the rest of this debate, CO analyze what this person is likely to think, rather than just claiming, as a Christian, we'll believe hell, we'll believe pearly gates, we'll see kids. We give you reasons as to why this person's faith, this person's trust is not something that they can choose, and it'll be something they'd be incapable of following through with. You would not be able to have faith in the murdering person who took your kids away from you, or at very least, as I said, let them die. CG, yes, you are correct. Religion teaches you about struggle. However, it links that struggle to your belief in God, to your faith in God. Job sees the consequences of what happened to himself, to his loved ones, to people around him, as the consequences of his action, i.e., his belief in God. You believed, you were tested, and it led to the death of your children. That belief is something that no individual can continue. Why? No matter how nice prop want to be about how much you want to be able to get out of bed, and if you can get out of bed, faith will keep you going. I want to posit, Job isn't able to get out of bed. Job's mental health is probably in the gutter. Job has lost everything. Physically, Job is in agony. Mentally, his loved ones are gone. Monetarily, he probably doesn't even have a bed to sleep in at night by the end of the Book of Job. I think that at this point, Job is incapable of believing. It is not choose to believe, it is would believe. Let's talk about faith. Panel, I have faith in you. What does that mean? It means I trust you. It means I am willing to stand here, say my speech, and believe that you will listen, weigh, and be fair to me. It does not mean that I believe in the concept of you existing there in front of me, that you are things, right? So it is not enough for proposition in this debate to say you were religious, you were told God is a thing, and you believe in that thing. You have to believe in the consequences, the reality, and that trust that you gave in them being something that has been given back to you. God has failed this person. The trust is gone, the trust is broken. Therefore, Job would not believe, Job would be incapable of having that faith. Yeah.
What's new in your extension is the strength of the emotions you feel. The question is whether you channel it into rage or hope for a better world, that your kids are in a better place, that this life is a transition.
Yeah.
Is this kind of ontology that allows you to keep the faith?
Yeah, Dylan, you are correct that pain and pleasure is something that is in your mind. What I tell you is any individual that is at this level of hopelessness, level of loss, this level of ill health, doesn't have the logic of a Heroes champion to apply to whether or not they believe in this God and this trust. I trust Jack as one of my best friends. Jack killed my mom. I might not have the same level of trust in him anymore. Whilst my mom was being killed and doesn't do anything, I don't have that trust anymore. If Jack sits there and watches me be incredibly ill, it's you know, he's Jack will do that. I would not have that trust anymore. That logic and that ability to make that decision is not something that actor would likely be able to do on the balance of probabilities in this debate. That is unlikely. Pascal's wager is indeed another debate, but anyway, Pascal's wager is not in and of itself faith or a belief. It is fear, and it is a gamble, and it is going, if the community tells me I might go to hell, I'll pretend to believe so that I don't go to hell. It is not belief. Being afraid that someone might send you to eternal damnation and then going, I don't actually think that's true, but just in case it is, sure, I'll act as if I'm Christian, is not belief. It definitely does not fit into faith. And if it is a case that is going to win this debate for proposition, it would have to give you layers of analysis as to why that wager is one that would result in a belief, not just throwing the term Pascal's wager at the spine panel, that I do believe in. Lastly, CG say we have no alternative. Jack will give you an alternative, and it's a little bit grim. It is that Joe closes his eyes, he goes to sleep on his own terms, and he doesn't believe in the murderer who took all of his joy from his life, who took his kids, and there is no promise that he will give anything back or anything nice in the future. Close your eyes, go to sleep, and love your children, have faith in your children, and don't love their murderer.
Thanks, Speaker, for that fine speech. All speakers for a great debate. One final round of applause for all speakers. Also, a reminder for the speakers in this round in terms of the remainder of this competition. This is me taking the judge hat off and putting the equity hat on. Remember the things that are said at the beginning of the debate, including the fact that you should be noting down people's pronoun preferences. All right, we will now, I believe, exit the room as Orcom will lead us to a different place to do the thing.